A lot of these prison escapes really shouldn't have worked at all. A convicted French robber escapes prison using Nectarines, 2 Chicago inmates Rapunzel out a window 17 stories up, and POWs almost escape a castle in Germany on a homemade glider. These are 10 more prison escapes that are too insane to believe. This first prisoner escaped with the help of his wife, a helicopter, and some fruit. Nadine Vajour was so determined to get her husband out of a Paris prison, she took helicopter flight lessons. Her husband, Michel Vajour, was serving a lengthy sentence for armed robbery. Well, in May 1986, the Chicago Tribune reported that there had been an escape. Part of the story read that Michael Vajour, quote, forced his way onto the prison's roof by wielding nectarines that were painted to look like grenades. I wish there was a picture of these. I mean, they must have looked really realistic, but I mean, that is insane. Once he made it up there, his wife picked him up in a helicopter and they flew off before landing on a football field and driving away by car. What is with France and prison escapes on helicopters? In part 1, I covered this guy who escaped multiple times in France in prisons from a helicopter. What's going on? And I think there's more cases too. Anyway, it's the type of thing you'd only see in a John Woo action movie, but they were not on the run for long. Nadine was tracked down and arrested in southwestern France. Michel stayed free for a bit longer, but he was later fired at during another bank robbery. He survived, but was of course sent right back to prison. In 2012, Ronald Silva, a Brazilian trafficker of illicit substances that cannot be named on YouTube, he pulled off a pretty insane prison escape using the power of drag. During a visit, his wife showed up and swapped clothes with him. She handed over what she was wearing and changed into spare clothes she'd brought in her bag. Silva didn't just throw on the outfit and walk out. He shaved his entire body, put on makeup, fake nails, and a wig to match the disguise. All he needed to do was to pass as his wife and then walk straight past the guards at the exit. But being that this isn't an Adam Sandler movie, this was probably gonna fail spectacularly, especially because his disguise was not convincing. I'll just say that. Well, somehow it didn't fail spectacularly. Somehow he actually made it out without being stopped and got onto the street. He didn't blend in for long though. As he headed toward a bus stop, a police officer noticed that he was having trouble walking. Yeah, the heels were apparently what gave him away. Next up is Richard McNair. Started in 1987 in Minot, North Dakota. McNair was breaking into a home when he ran into 2 men inside. Things escalated. He fired at both of them. One was badly injured, the other died. He was taken in for questioning in February 1988 and confessed. While being held at a police station though, he escaped. Officers caught him a few hours later. Even after being handcuffed to a chair, he managed to get free using lip balm to slide out of the cuffs and took off running again. He was caught shortly after that second escape. In 1992, while serving time at the North Dakota State Penitentiary, he escaped again with 2 other inmates. That one also didn't last long though. He was caught within hours. But that's not even the end, because his most well-known escape happened in 2006 at a federal prison in Louisiana. He managed to hide himself inside a pallet of materials that was being shipped out of the prison. At one point after escaping, a police officer came across him a few blocks away, and McNair just talked his way out of it by pretending he was a jogger passing through. He stayed free for about 10 months. During that time, he used fake identities, kept moving around, and eventually made his way into Canada, but he was finally caught again in 2007 and has not escaped since. This next prisoner ended up being nicknamed the Snake Man. The security footage you're looking at comes from a prison in Russia in 2016. Prisoner Rustam Shukrotinov is seen inside his cell with almost no clothing on, lining himself up at the front of a small food hatch built into the door. He then tries something really shouldn't work. He just pushes his head and shoulders into the hatch and starts forcing his way through the opening. He gets stuck around the waist, wedged halfway between the cell and the corridor, and now you're like, all right, that's it. It's jammed in there. It's a valiant effort, but ultimately this is gonna be a fail, except that's not what happens. He just keeps pushing bit by bit until he forces himself forward and he's through. Once he's out, he immediately reaches for a set of clothes that have been left right outside the door and he puts them on. Within a couple minutes, he's fully dressed, walking away from the cell area. He was caught not long after, but this is still an incredible feat. Jack Sheppard was a London thief in the early 1700s, but what made him famous wasn't really the thefts, it was all his daring prison escapes. I'm surprised no one's made a modern movie about this this guy's life yet. There's like one from 1969. I think this needs an update. So in 1724, he's arrested multiple times and managed to break out of prison 4 different times in the same year. In his first escape, he and a woman named Edgeworth Bess used tools and makeshift ropes made out of bed sheets to get out. They lowered themselves down from the building like Rapunzel. The two were captured, but later that same year, Jack escaped from Newgate prison, which was supposed to be nearly impossible to break out of. He'd been chained up and locked in heavy restraints, but somehow he still managed to slip his hands free, climb through parts of the prison, and force his way through multiple locked doors to reach the roof. From there, he used a blanket to climb down to a nearby building and get onto the street. He was captured again shortly after and taken back to Newgate. By this point, security had been tightened even more. But when a big fight broke out during court proceedings happening nearby, the prison suddenly went into chaos. Guards were distracted and doors weren't being watched properly, so Jack took advantage, breaking free again and slipping out during the confusion. He was caught a final time and he was executed later that year. This is footage of an inmate named Derrick Estell, who escaped from Garland County Detention Center in Arkansas in July 2013. The escape started with a setup inside the booking area. So another inmate inside the jail began distracting deputies, pulling them away from the intake window. At the same time, a man outside the jail was also helping pull attention away from the booking area. Once the deputies moved away from the window, Estell took his chance. He ran to the booking counter, jumped it, and went straight for a small service window that led outside. He squeezed through and got out into the open area before officers could stop him. Outside, a car was already waiting in the parking lot. A woman was behind the wheel, but the door opened. Estell got in, and the car took off. The getaway car was later found abandoned shortly after the escape. The manhunt started right away. Derrick didn't stay hidden for long. Later linked to a wider string of crimes during the time that he was on the run, including armed robbery and carjacking. He was eventually tracked down and arrested in Florida the following month. In December 2012, 2 inmates, Joseph Jose Banks and Kenneth Conley, escaped from the Metropolitan Correctional Center in downtown Chicago. They're both being held on bank robbery charges and shared the same cell on the 17th floor. Well, during the night, they worked on a section of their cell window, managed to break out part of the window opening and remove metal bars, which they hid inside the cell. To cover what they were doing, they stuffed their bed sheets with clothes so it looked like they were still sleeping. Once everything was ready, they squeezed out through the narrow window opening and got onto the outside wall of the building. From there, they used a rope they'd made out of bed sheets to climb down the side. They made it down and got away from the building, and then were seen on surveillance footage getting into a taxi a short distance away. The escape hadn't been discovered until the next morning, when staff noticed the rope still hanging from the building. After the escape, a massive manhunt started across Chicago. Banks was caught first, just a few days after. Conley stayed on the run longer, though. He made it about 2 weeks before police tracked him down in the Chicago suburbs and arrested him. Both were later charged for the escape itself on top of their original bank robbery cases. HM Prison Maze in Northern Ireland was one of the most heavily secured prisons in Europe at the time. Multiple fences, guard towers, and a full military presence around the outside. But on September 25th, 1983, a large group of inmates carried out what would become one of the most notorious prison escapes in UK history. It started inside the block. Some of the prisoners had managed to get hold of weapons inside the prison and use them to take control of the unit. Prison officers in that section were taken hostage, and the inmates basically controlled the entire wing. Once they had that part of the prison, they moved on to the next step. The delivery truck that regularly came into the prison was forced into the plant. Officers were made to open the way. The truck was used as part of the route toward the main gate. As things spread through the prison, more officers were overpowered in different areas. Some inmates even put on prison officer uniforms they'd taken earlier to blend into the movement inside. By the time alarms went off, it was chaos. A large group of prisoners were moving through the internal gates, pushing toward the outer fence. But in total, 38 inmates got out of the prison that day, making it one of the biggest prison escapes in European history. Now, this is an incredible story. So, during World War II, Colditz Castle in eastern Germany was turned into a POW camp. A lot of the men sent here were not first-timers. A lot of them had already tried escaping from other camps before being moved there. Specifically, they were seen as escape risks. Even with all that security, escape attempts kept happening. Some actually worked, most didn't. After March 1944, 50 prisoners were killed after a large breakout attempt from another camp known as Stalag Luft free, an event later called the Great Escape. Well, after that, British intelligence advised prisoners to just stop trying anything too ambitious, but inside Colditz, a small group wasn't ready to give up. Instead of scaling walls or digging tunnels, they started building a glider. The group included British pilots Bill Goldfinch and Jack Best, along with Tony Rold, who'd been a racing driver before the war. They worked in this hidden attic space inside the castle, slowly building the two-person glider using scavenged wood, bed slats, and electrical wiring. Their plan? Launch off the roof of the castle and just glide down to freedom. Before they ever got a chance to try it though, the castle was liberated by the Allies in April 1945. Decades later, in 2000, a full-size replica of the glider was built and actually flown in England, with some of the original prisoners there to see it finally take flight. John Dillinger was one of the most wanted criminals in the United States during the 1930s, and even getting locked up didn't slow him down. In 1934, he was being held in Lake County Jail in Indiana, where he managed to carve a fake pew-pew out of wood. He then painted it black so it looked real. During a transfer, Dillinger pulled his little replica firearm on the guards and forced them to lock themselves in a cell before he drove off in a sheriff's car. That escape made him one of the most wanted men in the country at the time and pushed the FBI into this massive nationwide manhunt. And he stayed on the run for a while. It's a few more months before he was finally tracked down and killed later that same year outside a movie theater in Chicago. That has been the video for today. I will catch you, yes you specifically, in the next one.